on number of issues. Once he came when I was Secretary Economic Affairs and he was Secretary DIPP, he came to my room in a very agitated mood because we had not agreed to something which he had proposed. So he came to my room very angry and he was ready to pick up a fight with me. So I had to cool him down, make him sit, and anyway, that is another story. So it's a 50 years friendship going back to college days, going back to the service. He has already mentioned he was in Kerala, I was in Tamil Nadu, and also in the government, especially when he was secretary in the Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, and I was initially Revenue Secretary, and then went on to become Economic Affairs Secretary. We had a lot of things to do together. I remember when I was Revenue Secretary and Amitabh was in the DIPP, we started this, correcting this whole process of removing inverted duty structure to make Indian products more competitive. In DEA, we also worked together on number of things, starting from, on ease of doing business, on liberalizing the FDI reforms. I remember in November 2015 and again sometime in 2016, he and we worked together, we sat down and we discussed a big liberalization of the FDI regime in India. After we had completed our discussions, we escalated it to the ministerial level and further up, and the decision by the government was taken. I think it was one of the quickest decisions. Within 1 week, we had got all clearances of what we had recommended. So that is the kind of experience I have had with Amitabh. I remember as a young collector, and this was narrated by the then Secretary Civil Aviation, that as a young collector of Cochin, Calicut, he went to meet the Civil Aviation Secretary of Government of India. And the Civil Aviation Secretary was very reluctant to give him the appointment because he was wondering what a collector has with Civil Aviation Secretary. I mean, they're completely unrelated. So as a young collector, dynamic collector, Amitabh entered into his room and the secretary had a lot of other things to do. So he asked him, yes, what is it? So Amitabh's opening sentence was, sir, I want to set up a new airport in Cochin. That is how the private participation, the government, the public-private participation of the Cochin airport started. And that is the kind of passion, that is the kind of positivity Amitabh has. Two hallmarks of his character, which I have seen over the years. What has impressed me the most, the two high points, the two hallmarks of his character, passion and positivity. The way he spoke now, it was full of passion. And that is the passion we see in his work also. And I'm not saying it just to please him because he is here before all of you. This is something which I have truly and sincerely and strongly felt over the years. His passion to deliver is unparalleled and it is infectious. Second thing is positivity. On every issue, he has a positive outlook, always keen to do certain things, always keen to deliver the results. So that is the kind of person that he is. So having said this much about the author, let me comment briefly on the book. I have had occasion to go through the book very briefly. He shared a copy with me a few days ago. And I would like to highlight four things. First, I think the book represents Amitabh's personal journey from Make in India to Made in India. The campaign of Make in India was launched, I think, sometime in 2014 end or 2015. He was again Secretary, Industrial Promotion and Policy. So that was Make in India, which was aspirational. It was an aspiration, it was something to be done. And today he is releasing a book called Made in India. That means that aspiration is now gaining traction. that aspiration is now becoming a reality. So I think it's reflective of his personal journey from, from an aspiration to something which is really happening today. And at a larger level, I think from Make in India to Made in India also represents the country's transition over the last several decades, or perhaps more than a century. Because he talks about deindustrialization, which happened in the pre-independence era during the colonial rule, how deindustrialization happened. He mentioned about India's GDP being 24-25% of the world GDP and how it shrunk. He has also talked of, the deindustrialization, or what has been described as, the drain of wealth from India as a part of colonial administration's strategic move, not only in India, but in Africa and wherever colonial rule existed. So in a sense, at a larger level, I think the book also represents a transition from colonial India, the starting up of private initiative even during the colonial India, and over the last 75 years after India became independent, how the process of industrialization has taken off. So it represents the transition of India at a larger scale. It represents his personal journey also. The second aspect I would like to, what impressed me most, again related to the first one, is that he has really captured India's growth story, the manufacturing sector, the service sector, the new business models, the startups, the payment ecosystem, and you name it. I think he has really captured the India's growth story in the last 7.5 decades. The third thing which comes out very clearly in the book, what he has described as the reigniting of reforms post 2014, where he was actively participating, and I also happened to be there. And it was from very close quarters that he has described how the whole process of transformation, how the whole process of economic reforms and the changes that we have had leading us to a situation where we have a direct benefit transfer facility, where other countries during the COVID were grappling with the problem of sending checks or how to transfer money to the people affected by COVID. Here in India, on a Sunday, Reserve Bank, we worked with the government and the Reserve Bank, we worked together, and on a Sunday, at the click of one button, money was transferred to 30 crore families. So the book, in a way, also represents post-2014, how the reforms have taken place, and he has written it out of his personal experience, and that is something which comes across quite impressively throughout the book. And the fourth aspect which he has highlighted and which he touched about is the role of the private sector. Now, it's the private sector which really has to drive growth, which has to drive investment, and which has to lead the way forward. Government has to provide an enabling ecosystem. Government has to carry out the required reforms in various sectors of the economy. That is the role of the government to play, the government to act as a facilitator and to provide an enabling environment where private sector can really play. And he has continuously throughout the book emphasized the role of private sector, and he has captured it. So the book has come across very well. It makes very interesting reading. Despite, I got it very recently, but still I have been able to go through it to a considerable extent. And so my congratulations to Amitabh from the depth of my heart for really capturing this entire story through his words. Having said that, before I conclude, if we are talking of Make in India, I think very briefly, I don't want to stand between this august panel which is gathered here and you, but very briefly I want to touch upon in terms when we are talking of Make in India, Made in India, where are we today and where do we go from here? Going forward, what next? Where we stand today, the country's GDP is expected to have grown by 7% last year, 22-23. Current year, 23-24, we have given a projection of 6.5% from the RBI. And we are quite optimistic and fairly confident that the growth, actual growth will be close to that. Although international agencies like the IMF have given lower projections, but we have sort of shared our thoughts with the IMF, and we are reasonably sort of optimistic and confident that the growth will be close to 6.5%. You look at the high frequency indicators. You ask Mr. Chandrasekaran, he will tell you what is the kind of sales growth that his company or the sectors in which they are present, how those sectors are growing. You ask any entrepreneur today in various sectors, the underlying, the growth momentum, the month-on-month growth. It's not just statistical that last year or year before last we had low growth. Yes, there is a statistical factor playing a role. I'm not denying that. There is a statistical element in that. But the momentum, month on month also we see good momentum, and in fact almost all the high frequency indicators are revealing that. Our analysis in the Reserve Bank shows that urban demand continues to be strong, rural demand has started picking up and will get further support from an excellent Rabi crop. The procurement by the government has already exceeded last year's procurement. Private capital investment by the government's capex has been really very high over the last 2 years, and in the current year also the budget provision is very high. That will provide a lot of support to growth. Private investment also, there are clear indications that private investment is picking up in sectors like steel, cement, petrochemicals, and several other sectors. And current year, our projection of 6.5%, if it materializes, India would have contributed to world growth by about 15%. In other words, 15% of the world growth in the current financial year will come from India, and it's not a mean achievement. So these are the factors which give us the confidence that the India story, that the made in India, the make in India, all these are no more aspirations, but they can really materialize. Nearer home, as I was just leaving office a little while ago, the inflation numbers came out for the month of April. And it was very satisfying to note that the consumer price inflation, last month it was that is in the month of March, which really data was released in April, on April 12th. The consumer inflation, the headline inflation was 5.7%. And the inflation number for April, which was released today, 5:30 p.m. as I was just about to leave office, was 4.7%. So it gives me and my colleagues in the Reserve Bank to say with reasonable amount of confidence, in fact, I would say with good amount of confidence, that the monetary policy is on the right track. And our job in the Reserve Bank, I'll conclude with this, our job in the Reserve Bank is to provide a financial ecosystem, a financial sector ecosystem which will facilitate the aspirations of every citizen of this country, that India should grow fast, Indians should do well, the country should do well. So as a part of this exercise over the last few years, we have carried out significant reforms in the regulatory architecture of the financial sector, whether it is banks, whether it is non-bank finance companies, whether it is the cooperative banking sector, whether it is, you mention any sector of what constitutes the financial sector, we have carried out the required regulatory reforms. Supervision has been tightened. And over the years, despite COVID, despite the impact of the Ukraine war, one thing which we have ensured also, and some amount of luck has also helped us, is the stability of the Indian rupee. That is something which business, the private sector and the private investors, they need it. Unless your currency is stable, investors will not feel confident to invest, whether investors from India or foreign investors who are looking at India as an investment destination. In fact, the rupee is the least volatile currency if you compare Indian rupee with the currencies of our peer countries. It has been over the last 1 year, after the Ukraine war, in the last 1 year, it has been the least volatile currency. This year, from 1st January, the dollar has depreciated by about 1.5%. It varies from day to day, but roughly about 1.5%. The rupee has appreciated by about 0.9% or 1%. Now, I'm not saying appreciation is good. We have no belief. I mean, I'm not saying appreciation is good or depreciation is good, because that is reaching a value judgment, and an importer will say that appreciation is good, and exporter will say that depreciation is good. So depending on where you stand, you look at things. But as the central bank, our effort has been to ensure that the volatility in the Indian currency is contained. We have also been looking at sunrise sectors, like, for example, giving boost to the fintech sector, and we have laid down guidelines for digital lending, and we have also set up an innovation hub in Bangalore. I think going forward, to conclude, let me say that the Indian economy needs to continue with reforms, the reforms which have been initiated in the in the various sectors of the economy, not just in the financial sector, but in the other sectors. The reforms which have been initiated, they need to be continued. We need to focus more on technology, because access to technology, thanks to the fragmentation, the global fragmentation which has taken place, thanks to the kind of geopolitics that we are witnessing today, and perhaps which may continue even in the coming years. We need access to technology, which also necessitates that our expenditure on research and development has to increase, has to improve. Not just the government, but also the private sector. And Indian business, Indian private enterprise have great opportunities. Foreign entrepreneurs and foreign enterprises which are looking at India as a destination also, I think it's definitely, India has been an attractive place. We have had good inflows of the forex in the current year, which we have been witnessing. So I personally feel that the release of a book like this at the current juncture is very timely. And let me conclude by once again congratulating my dear friend of 50 years. All the very best in whatever he does, and I wish the book all success. Thank you.
Governor, thank you so much. I'm actually tempted now, since you talked about inflation, I'm actually tempted to, I know Mr. Kant is, I know you're not taking questions, but that's what I said. I'm tempted to ask you whether today's inflation print will change your stance from a hawkish pause to a dovish pause, Mr. Kant. And the other question I would have asked you, if you're please feel free to answer, is the 10-year bond yield below 7% at a fresh 13-month low, sir.
I'll move to the audience with just one sentence.
I tried my luck.
One sentence. 10 a.m. on 8th of June. You will know what the policy is.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, the RBI Governor Shaktikanta Das. All right, so that is my cue now to get started with this panel discussion, with the conversation that we're going to have with some of India's best and brightest business leaders. I think from what you heard from Mr. Kant, as well as what you heard from the RBI governor there, it's very, very clear, and the data does indicate that this is a unique position that we find ourselves in. Mr. Kant and Mr. Das talked about the growth numbers for this year, as well as the growth numbers for next year. But if you were to take a forecast to about 2030 or 2031, most estimates suggest the Indian economy has the potential to double over the next 2 decades or so. And what that will mean, the kind of power that will unleash, the kind of opportunities it opens up are immense, but it comes with its own set of challenges as well. If this is going to be a once-in-a-generation shift, what do we need to do to ensure that all of our cards are in the right place? That is the question that I want to address with each one of you. Mr. Chandrasekhar, let me start by asking you, at the Delhi launch, we had the External Affairs Minister. Yes, you. Yes, you. Since the cliche of software to salt conglomerate, you have your finger on just about every industry. So let me get started with you, Mr. Chandrasekhar. At the Delhi launch, the External Affairs Minister said that, look, India is uniquely positioned, uniquely poised, but let's not go around looking for the China fix of efficiency. If we don't go looking for the China fix of efficiency, what is the India fix going to be over the next 25 years?
Shirin, you heard this from me before, so I'm going to repeat it. See, it's definitely a very, very unique opportunity. I'm going to take a little bit of time.
Go ahead.
Before I start, I want to first congratulate Amitabh Kant on the launch of the book and also for all that he has done. From a government service, he is someone who has created a magical brand multiple times. What he did with God's own country and repeated it with Incredible India, now with India being at the high table in G20, repeating it for the third time. So, a remarkable individual, great accomplishments, and many things have already been said about Amitabh, so I don't want to add anything more.
Is he the India fix? Is Amitabh Kant, is Amitabh Kant the India fix?
So, let me congratulate Amitabh first of all on the book. It's a great book. We'll come to that later. Now, coming to the question that you asked, I think it is a unique opportunity for India for multiple reasons. There are 3 transitions and there are moving geopolitical situations. From the transitions point of view, the first is digital and AI, second one is energy, third one is supply chain. In all the 3 transitions, I would say that India is probably the best placed country in the world. First, on the digital, just 2 primary reasons. First, there is no country in the world which has demonstrated a large-scale digital intervention and digital platform for public services delivery, which is transformative at scale. I think, everyone who has lived abroad in any country or has done business anywhere, whether it is the UPI, whether it is the Aadhaar, whether it is Jan Dhan Yojana, you can go on and on. The second thing on the digital side is, it's no secret that we have the best talent available from a digital point of view for the future. And the scale and the depth that India has, again, is unparalleled. You can add all the talent that's available from next 10 countries, still they will fall short. So these 2 are big tailwinds. If you take the energy transition, India is probably the only country in the world which has to achieve the energy transition purely only accounting for growth. Most other people, whatever be the country you take, their energy transition to renewable or new energy, what have you, has to be substitution. Shutting down what is working and then, but whereas in India, if whatever be the doubling, tripling, whatever is the GDP number you take by 2047, the needs of growth that we have between now and 2047 or 2050 is at least 3 times more than what we have. And all of this will be new energy. And we will do renewables, we will do wind, we will do solar, we will do SMR, we will do 10 other technologies. And that is unique opportunity because with growth you can fix anything. Priority should be growth, growth, growth. And when you do something for growth, you are not so much under stress like when you do it for substitution. The third thing, whether you call it this country fix, that country fix, it doesn't matter. To my mind, the global supply chain is going to be rebuilt. And it is being rebuilt as we speak. It is not that it is going to happen, it is beginning, it is happening. We are in the middle of that. Sometimes you don't realize when something is happening. You always connect the dots backwards. And any supply chain is an ecosystem play. So I keep referring as India Plus. I never use any other example of saying that we are replacing somebody. We are not replacing anyone. We have an opportunity to create a global alternative supply chain base, which I call it as India Plus, because India can't do it alone. But just the sheer size, scale, and everything else that we have positions India to be the lead in this alternative supply chain. Somebody else cannot take the lead. It has to be India, and India is taking that lead, and the supply chain will get built over the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. But above all of this, there is one fundamental factor, which is, I have to say this, under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, what has fundamentally changed is the belief and the aspiration of every Indian and every sector. You can feel it in the urban, you can feel it in the rural, you can feel it in poor people, rich people, educated, uneducated. It is there everywhere. As a country, we had the audacity in the middle of the COVID, when every other nation was going after Pfizer and Moderna, which normally we would have done, how to find the money, run helter-skelter, to see how to get Moderna, Pfizer, or which country we can import from. Instead of all that, to say that we'll build our own vaccine in the middle of a crisis. There is something to be said about that. So this whole Make in India, I mean, honestly, if you ask all of us in this room, we will recognize this Make in India started as a campaign, slogan. So everybody thought it will be a slogan. The slogan became a movement. Movement became a belief. Now we are in the execution phase. So there is no question it is going to happen. So I really believe that we should give ourselves the chance. And we have to make bets. We have to take risks. Everything we do will not work. But it's okay.
Thank you. You're right in pointing out that we are currently in the execution phase as far as Make in India is concerned. And in your words, the global supply chain is being rebuilt, and India stands to gain from that rebuilding, so to speak. But I want to address this larger issue with you because, again, you straddle both software services, which is where you spent a large part of your career, and now outside of that as well. That has been the big India growth story. That has been our engine of growth for several decades now. The aspiration of becoming now the factory floor of the world, how easy or challenging will that be?
Nothing is easy in life. All the business people will tell you to make a 100 crore profit. Even why 100 crore profit? To become EBITDA positive is not easy. So who says it is easy? Okay, so we are not doing these things because something is easy. And I tell you, if you are doing easy things, why we will succeed? Everyone else will do the same thing. So I think we have to do things where we have a chance. What is going for us? The geopolitics is going for us. It's clear. In the current geopolitics, I think we are uniquely positioned. And this will last for a few years. I don't know, it will last for 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, I don't know. And you cannot miss the moment. So the geopolitics allows you to form partnerships, technology partnerships, finance partnerships, supply chain partnerships, customer-supplier partnerships. All this is possible because the timing is there. Second, we have the talent. Yes, they are not skilled. We are putting together a complete value chain in the electronics. We are doing the precision manufacturing now. We are slowly moving into packaging, assembly, then getting into semiconductor testing. Then we have to put a fab design. Then eventually to vertically integrate, we have to put a fab. That's the whole chain. We have a lot of skills in India on the fab design, but we don't have skills in precision manufacturing. And it's hard work. And some of us are working on a quality model also. But we have the scale. So if we have the vision to do this, time is now. Money will come. Usually, while I am not going to say that it's easy to get 10 billion, 20 billion, 30 billion, 50 billion, it's not going to be easy, but money is available once you have the right project. If you have the right project, right management team, there is Uday to fund.
That gives me the perfect segue to come to address that exact question to you, Mr. Kotak. You know, everyone's talking about how we can double as an economy by 2030 and so on and so forth. One issue I think we need to be mindful of, and I think Mr. Kant mentions that in his book very specifically, is let's not get carried away with 5 to number 3 in the world, but let's focus also as far as per capita is concerned. And there is a big difference there. There is a big difference between us and some of the countries that we just spoke of. The other issue is the issue of financing. We have this aspiration. What will it take to finance this aspiration? Where will the financing come in from? And what do you believe will need to be done in terms of capacity and capability building specifically from that perspective?
Thank you, Shireen. First, congratulations to Amitabh. I think it's a fantastic book, and if you read the whole book, you must not miss the last chapter. The last chapter is about our future. And it reminds me of a simple line. Let's not keep the baggage of history, but learn from the lessons of history. And that's, in my view, what Amitabh's book highlights. Let's keep the lessons and move forward. The second thing which I've seen Amitabh in his own career, he's always explored the art of the possible, and he's now mastering the science of execution, because both going together is what is going to make it happen. So coming first, I must, in that context, on the financial sector, I'm saying this with all genuineness, that India stands out as one of the most stable financial systems in the world today. And I want to publicly congratulate the RBI and the government for an outstanding job of making India stand out. And when I look at every night or every morning, one more bank in the US is in trouble, or somebody in Europe is in trouble, I say, we've got something right. We've got our act together. We've created a stable financial system, well capitalized, and it's a Goldilocks time. Lowest non-performing assets, clean credit, reasonable growth in the book, and none of these risk issues like we are seeing in the developed nations. So I genuinely feel very good about the stability and the solidity of the Indian financial sector. Having said that, taking a cue from Amitabh, where do we go from here? And how do we take this wonderful situation we are in? I think we need to be feeling good about ourselves, but always introspecting. What is it that we can do better? So if I think about capacity building in the financial sector, we really need to get some of the important guardrails in place. I think the concept of IBC was a great concept. It really was the basis of creditor being in control, but I think there is work to be done. I think we really need to fix the judicial system, which is consistent with a bankruptcy law, because at the end of the day, if banks lend money, we must be able to recover the money. If we have a problem there, it constrains our ability to take better risk. In the same context, I think we must now get this balance right between the needs of the corporate sector. When Chandra tells me that he wants to buy a 50,000 crore company in India, I have to tell him. I will have to tell him, Chandra, please go to a foreign bank and get it funded outside, because I cannot fund you in India. If we have to grow forward, I think these are risks. I think Indian banks have to be able to understand and manage these risks, like acquisition financing, project financing. We got into trouble on infrastructure financing.
Yeah.
If you look at 2008 to 2018, it was a year when we did not get infrastructure financing right, and banks took the wrong risks because the guardrails of the system were not in place. Therefore, we need a unified, well-coordinated system, and I do believe India has the brain power and the risk management to be able to manage a financial sector which meets the aspirations of all of India's growth as we go forward.
Has he been talking to you about making a 50,000 crore rupee acquisition?
He doesn't talk anything below 100,000.
Well, you know, I'll come to the risks and the bets with the two of you in just a second. But Falguni, let's address the issue of growth and therein the kind of power of consumption that we can possibly see being unleashed if we do see this per capita jump that everyone's talking about. The other issue I want to raise with you is the power of technology, something that Chandra started by saying he believes the digitization transition is going to be one of the big growth engines fueling our future. As you look at where we are today and as the landscape plays itself out, what are the big bets that you're willing to make on the power of consumption and technology?
Sure. But thanks, Sheen, for that. But before I answer that, I want to go back to the history that everyone's talking about. And I just, being a startup representative, of startup entrepreneur here, I want to just say that just around the time when Startup India movement started, and I think that big photograph of Modi ji on a stage with a lot of startup entrepreneurs, all very young. I'm one of the oddities there, but gave a lot of credibility to startup businesses. And if I remember that day in 2015, and I have to talk ground floor level because that's where I am vis-a-vis the two gentlemen here. So if I talk about that, like our turnover was about 20 crores, and from there we've grown about 300 times. And that is what gives us confidence that you know, tomorrow is also there for our platforms. As I travel and meet our brand partners all over the world in beauty and in fashion, which are important industries for those who believe they're not, but I do because I think consumers love them. But I think for those, what I can say is that they are noticing India, and they are noticing India, power of Indian millennials, power of Gen Z, which is coming of age. And they are very excited about what India has to offer. I think India is becoming one of the top markets for all these players. And I'm convinced that the next decade will be the decade for Indian consumption. It'll be the decade for, obviously, consumption is driven by income, so first incomes have to go up. But I'm very confident that the young India, with the power of their enterprise, will take India into a generation where both income and consumption will grow. Talking of the platforms, I think Chandra already said that. We are very aware that our platforms are some of the best in the world. When we meet against these global partners, they compliment us for having one of the best platforms. It's not just about coming from India, but it's in the world, one of the best platforms are coming out of India because of the sheer talent that is available and ability to do complex tasks. So I think if we were to marry technology with problems that we need to solve in the country, which is what most of the startup entrepreneurs have addressed, I think the sky is the limit in terms of driving our Indian consumption and attracting many of the global players to come into India to address those markets. And of course, that doesn't mean we can't export. So beyond that, we'd of course like to dream how we can take our Indian brands into global markets.
And that's a very crucial issue. And I know that, Mr. Kant, that is something that you're very, very passionate about. How do we actually get India to export more? How do we get India to take more share of global trade? And that's what I want to address with you. You know, you spoke very passionately about wanting to unleash and unshackle the private sector. You said that you want the private sector to flourish and you want the private sector to fly. Let's talk about the size problem that we have in this country. In your book, you address the issue of the fact that we've only got a handful of large conglomerates. Most of them are actually sitting on this stage and some of them are here in this room as well. How do you ensure that that number moves up? How do we ensure that, in your words, we have thousands of, scale companies, not just small enterprises, not medium enterprises, but scale enterprises, because that is going to be responsible for the kind of growth aspiration that we have?
So Shireen, if you look back at the years when India has really grown, and India has grown at 8 to 9% for 4 to 5 years, but it hasn't grown for decades like other countries have done. But every time we've done that, it's because our exports have grown. So exports are the key to growth, really. And that really means that you need companies who'll penetrate global markets. You need size and scale of manufacturing. And that's why we brought in the PLI scheme. The production-linked incentive scheme was very simple. Many people mistake it for subsidy. It's not. It says that you are here. We want you to go every year, keep raising your production from here to here, here to here, here to here in 5 years' time. You fix your targets, achieve them. If you don't achieve them, you don't get it. But 5 years' time, it gives you this opportunity to become global in size and scale. And once you have companies of that global size and scale, you will have tier 2 manufacturers, tier 3 like Maruti came in, and all these MSMEs came in automobile sector because of Maruti. It's an automatic backward-forward linkage. And therefore, you need large companies for MSME to flow. I mean, for MSMEs will grow if you have very large companies, and then they will penetrate global markets. It's very important. So I think for large companies to also happen in India, we need to scrap a lot of labor laws which were made a long time back. We need to decriminalize a lot, which the Prime Minister is pushing for. You need to make your infrastructure far more easy because your logistic costs are high. That's what Gati Shakti is doing. So a lot of that work is in action right now. And I think in the next 2 to 3 years, you'll see India becoming more and more efficient in many of these areas to enable large scale, size and scale. Without that, look at a sector where India has the potential. I think to my mind, green hydrogen is the area where India has the potential. Today, the cost of producing green hydrogen is $4.5 per kilogram. India is the only country which is climatically blessed. It has top-class entrepreneurship. It is possible for it to bring it down to $1 per kilogram. But it will not happen, and you can be the biggest producer and exporter to the world, but it will not happen without size and scale. So size and scale is really the key to it.
Let's get into this issue of size and scale, and I'll get both Mr. Kotak and Mr. Chandrasekaran to address that. Mr. Kotak, why don't you go first? Whether it's banks, world-class and world-size banks, which is what you were talking about, or it is world-size and world-class companies that are exporting to the world. And of course, he highlights the Korea example several times over in the book to make that point. What will it take for us to be able to build size and scale? This missing middle has been one of our perennial problems. How do we address that? Are we at an inflection point of being able to address it?
I think the mindset is positive. The mindset is about reform, taking the country forward. What we need to keep in mind is that as we go down this, we want many cars to run on the roads. And the more the cars are, the risk increases. There's, of course, a risk of accidents along the way. The answer to that is for us to get better road regulation, get our systems, our signals and all that in place, rather than taking an approach which we have taken historically, that, because there are accidents, we don't want so many cars on the road. Let's encourage more cars. Let us encourage and build more roads. Traffic and congestion is an inevitable part of it. We will manage it, but we will have to take the risks of potential accidents along the way and manage those accidents rather than saying we don't want accidents. governance.
You talked about bets and risks. What are the big bets and big risks that you're willing to make at this point in time, Chandra?
Forget about what I am willing to
Why not? Why forget that? That's a barometer of what we can expect as far as the country is concerned, given your size and scale.
No, we are already doing a number of things. We are doing huge transitions in automotive. We have pivoted to electric vehicles. We have pivoted to fuel cells in commercial vehicles, then renewable power, both size and transition we are doing. We are working on carbon capture. We are putting together the electronics vertical. We are putting together the mobile telephony infrastructure, whether it's 5G, 6G, 6.5G. They are getting into batteries, lithium batteries. So I think we will do whatever is needed, and whatever we can do, we will do. But the fundamental point is, the opportunity is huge. If India has to realize its potential, forget about whether we'll grow 6%, 6.5%, 7%. It's good for some headlines every other week. I think the opportunity is even double digit. But that doesn't mean that it's easy. Okay, I think what opportunity is not there. You take consumption. I think the trends are very clear. India is becoming a formal economy. The aspiration of the people is increasing. The per capita income is going to increase. The affordability for spending is increased. And then, once we cross, I think there is enough theory that the 3,000 mark, once it crosses, then you see a hockey stick in consumption. Whether it is $3,000, $3,500, we don't know. But at the same time, we have a lot of disparity. One state is at $8,000 and another state is at $800. So we've got to figure out a way to fix it if you want to really capture the true power of consumption. Second thing is demography. I think Amitabh Kant talked about the age and so on and so forth. So we have got to do skilling. And we have to do 21st century skilling. We have got to differentiate between what is the industrial skilling we need to do, what is the digital skilling we need to do. Similarly, in the whole infrastructure, B2B side, all these industries, everywhere there is so much growth opportunity. But it's going to require a lot of hard work. It's not going to be it's going to be a little bit chaotic, because order doesn't come. And Indians by general, we like confusion, clarity out of chaos. Okay, I mean, we see the way we drive. So we like that. We're at ease with a little bit chaos.
To live in a perpetual state of chaos and confusion and make our way through it.
So we'll come through, but the point is we have to work at it.
No, I get that we have to work at it, but let's address one of the issues, because Mr. Kant brought up the demographic advantage, and I think that gets held up very often as one of the critical advantages that India enjoys as the world ages. But where will the jobs come from? Skilling is one aspect, but where will the jobs come from? And especially as we're now talking about AI being the next disruption in India, leading in the AI war and so on and so forth. Where do you create the jobs for this demographic?
See, I think I want to, first of all, tell you that a creation of all these industries are going to create a very strong MSME ecosystem. India needs 100 million jobs, and probably now 90 million jobs, whatever is the number. All of this is not going to come from big companies. So it's going to come across sectors. There is going to be a huge amount of jobs that's going to come in consumption, hospitality, healthcare. Services sector can explode. Services sector not only for India and for the rest of the world. There will be remote healthcare services sector, which in my opinion can be another IT industry. Okay, if you're creating 10 million jobs and 10 or 15 million jobs in IT but BPO, we can create a similar number of jobs in healthcare sector. That is the potential. Will it happen tomorrow? It will not happen tomorrow. Will it happen over the next 10 years? Yes. Hospitality sector is a big thing. Entire MSME ecosystem, if you're going to develop an electronic semiconductor base, the number of companies you will create is just enormous. Each of those companies will have 50, 100, 150, 200 people. And all of this will mushroom. Wherever these companies are housed, all those companies will come. And the big companies, when they export. See, I mean, there is no reason for the electronics manufacturing semiconductor not to repeat the IT industry. Why not? We can repeat the whole model again. It's just not that it's exactly a copy of the same thing, but the potential is the same thing because the world needs it. The world is going to need chips. There will always be volatility. This year they will say, now there is a glut. But it will change because there is no way technology and chips are going to disappear. So I think the opportunity is there, but it's just that we try to capture it in one spreadsheet. It is not possible.
Okay. Speaking of capturing in spreadsheets, Mr. Kotak, let's address this issue with you as well. You know, Chandra was talking about he has a mic. Chandra was talking about the opportunity of creating another IT services sector in India. It could be remote health, for instance, as an example that he held up. This aspiration of moving from having been the back office of the world, and that's the experience that we've had for over 2 decades now, and we've delivered on that successfully, to being the front office of the world and the potential that that holds up.
You know, COVID has opened our eyes to the new vistas of opportunity. What COVID did is you could be in any part of the world and virtually operate in any other part of the world. This is India's biggest opportunity. We have thought about most of our software services as significantly back office. We have to change our mindset that an office for somebody in America is operating out of Chennai or Calicut. We've got to make that change in our minds, and I think the world is much more open to having a lot more jobs happening from anywhere in the world in the virtual dynamism which we are seeing post-COVID. COVID has really opened up huge possibilities for India to have the front-end office jobs. Combine it with AI and various other opportunities, India can be the leading office of the world, front or back. And we need to take that opportunity now, because that's where, Chandra, we can create a lot of jobs. I agree, healthcare is another big one. And again, there will be out-of-the-box areas for jobs. Sports, you're talking about IPL, Kabaddi, so many games. Sports is going to be the next big thing. We happen to be, as a family, we associated with a Kabaddi team. Kabaddi players who barely had enough subsistence are today making 1 crore, 2 crores of rupees. Those jobs did not exist. So we have a whole new generation and imagination, leisure. Leisure is going to be a big industry. So let's not restrict our imagination of the future of jobs. Let us open our vista and we'll create a completely new paradigm of opportunities across the board.
You've clearly triggered Chandra's imagination. He's waiting to get in.
Another sector is tourism. I think, it'll be out of place when Amitabh is sitting here and Puneet is sitting here. But I think, Puneet, the number of hotels in New York exceed the number of hotels in India. So, I mean, the numbers are staggering. So, given that, tourism will be a huge sector. So, it's a question of identifying and then providing the devil is in detail. Each of these has to be mapped, and I can see McKinsey guy sitting there also. So, I'm pretty sure they have charts on each one of these. But the point is that each one of these has huge potential. So the opportunity is there, but we cannot just say easy. There's no easy picking.
The McKinsey spreadsheets are probably at the Niti Aayog, or were with the Niti Aayog when Mr. Kant was there. But Falguni, let's address some of the other untapped opportunities that we just spoke of. And I think one of the things that both we heard there from Mr. Kotak as well as Chandra was this ecosystem effect as far as small businesses are concerned. You know, platforms like yours give air to a lot of private labels What has been the experience of seeing this ecosystem being created, and where do you see this go? And my second question to you, because if India has to grow at 10% or 10% plus, which is what everybody here is talking about, it cannot do it without its women. And unfortunately, we've seen a not so great trend on that front, whether it's labor force participation or women in entrepreneurship. I mean, even today, to hear you being called out as a woman business leader, I mean, that tells us the story as well, doesn't it? So what will it take to create this ecosystem of enterprises at the small and medium level that will have access to platforms like yours, and how do we just get more women to work?
So I'll first address the first question, and I think again, small is beautiful is always what I'll have to say. So I think if you look at global supply chain and fashion, the company that's doing well in US and giving run for its money to all of the US fashion labels is someone who believes in small lot production that they do in China. And through that, because I think today's consumer wants a lot of newness and stuff like that. So through that, they're addressing needs of the entire country like US. I think India is very well suited for that. And I think platforms like ours, what we do is that we have more than 6,000-7,000 brands, and each of them is getting size and scale in India. Because when you want to become an exporter, the home market size and scale is important. So when you have size and scale in the country, you can, on top of that, aspire for exports. So at least in beauty and fashion, where even small is beautiful, I see a lot of brands coming out of India, meeting like, about direct-to-consumer stories. There's so many brands have sprung up. And when you give, foreign brands run for its money by being as popular as an Indian brand in the country, that itself is replacement of jobs that would have otherwise gone abroad. So I think replacing international production in the country, as well as having a strong base that allows you to export and aspire to export, is great. So I personally feel that the MSME component is going to be very strong going forward, thanks to platforms, which will take away a lot of headaches. We say that we'll take away your supply chain headaches. We'll tell you, how much you should produce, how much we'll buy. We'll take away your sales and marketing headaches. So I think that allows them to use their skill on innovation and marketing. I think talking about women, I think you know what I've always said, that I think I don't like to compartmentalize women, and I personally feel that since women hold half the sky, I won't be satisfied till I really see equal numbers. So I mean, seeing small numbers is not really worth talking about till we get there. But my only thing is that I think empowerment begins at home, and I would like to see each of the men empower closest to their home for women to make progress. And with that, I think it also comes from confidence. I don't know, I'm just fortunate to have Nykaa stand for women empowerment. I think as we started building a brand, a lot of women came up to us and said that we really love the fact that you're asking us to dream. Because for too long, women have not even dared to dream. And I think if they can only dream for themselves, world will be theirs. So with that, I think we have a long way to go. So with that, I hope for the best. But I think India is a very fortunate place. And this is a very fortunate century, decade, whatever you say, for women. And it'll only be positive from here. That also I can predict.
That is the perfect ending note for this conversation then. And I'm going to start by asking each one of you, and I'll give you the last word, Mr. Kant. Mr. Kotak, Falguni talked about the ability to dream. And I know that all of you, sitting here on this stage have always believed in dreaming big. What's the next big dream that you have for the bank, but more importantly for India?
I would love to see a financial institution from India be amongst the top 2 or 3 in the world.